Hello, I'm Trevor Cooling. I'm Professor of Christian Education at Canterbury Christ Church University. And I'm here at Chelsea Academy, which is a Church of England sponsored academy, with Andrew Copson, who's Chief Executive of the British Humanist Association. And we're just going to spend a bit of time chatting about the relationship between humanists and Christians and their views about education. So Andrew, it's great to have you here, and thanks very much for coming along.
Thank you.
I was just wondering if you could say something about how you as humanists feel about schools like this, sponsored by the church.
Like all the issues surrounding state-funded religious schools, there's an enormous variety, not only of different types of religion within our school system, but different types of schools. So some religious schools obviously do teach a balanced and broad curriculum about different beliefs and different religions. I've seen some excellent practice of good religious education that is open, that is inquiry-based, that allows young people to make their own minds up about different questions and equips them with the resources to do so. But I've also been to state-funded religious schools where the religious education provided has been, frankly, indoctrinatory, has been the repetition of certain stories, has been the reinforcement of certain things as fact. And my problem would be that our current law allows both those sorts of practice to flourish. I think that the right of a child to a balanced education requires that they really only receive the first sort.
Okay, so the objection isn't so much to the Christian side of it as to the way in which the Christian side of it is dealt with. Is that right?
I think that's partly right. I mean, there are obviously Church of England schools who will teach about a range of different religious and non-religious worldviews or approaches to life in a way that does not favour one or the other, that is objective in and fair and balanced.
Can I ask you a
in
question
both
about
content
that?
and
Do you
approach.
think that's actually possible for anybody to teach in that sort of neutral way that you've described?
It's a good question, and I mean that question illustrates a whole range of debates within education. Is the neutral teacher ever possible? Is neutrality in matters, especially of profound belief, ever really achievable? Is it desirable within the curriculum? My view is that although it is impossible for any human being to be neutral on every ultimate question that confronts him or her in the world, it is possible for a teacher professionally to be objective in the way that they teach about particular religions or beliefs. Now, that doesn't prohibit, of course, them being available to their pupils as a resource, if that's appropriate and professionally managed, if they do represent particular beliefs, humanist or Christian or Muslim or whatever. But I think it is a professional obligation on teachers to attempt, to the best of their ability, to present different beliefs, especially beliefs that are different from their own, in as objective and fair and balanced a way as possible. So neutrality is not possible, but in a way I think neutrality is a red herring because it's not what's desirable in the curriculum.
Okay, so I think people's beliefs, like my beliefs as a Christian and your beliefs as a humanist, will shape the sort of concepts of human flourishing which schools might adopt, or do you think they're irrelevant to deciding what schools are about when they're helping young people go into the big wide world?
Yeah, this is a very big question which goes to the whole purpose of education.
Yeah.
I can see it's not easy to resolve. I don't think that our individual beliefs are irrelevant. I don't think that. But I think that in building the shared institutions of our society, that we all, as humanists or Christians or Muslims or whatever, need to try and build them around the values that we share. Now, I believe in the existence of shared values. I do think that although we may all come from different starting points when we look at how we shape our values, there is substantial overlap in where we end up. And I think the exercise that was done, must be a long time ago now, 10 or 12 years maybe, when
About
they
1997, I think it was.
Was it 97? Right, it's a long time. Building the Statement of Shared Values for the National Curriculum, which found incredibly high levels, actually, of commonality in certain values. I think that they're the values around which we should build our shared institutions like schools. So I don't think that our individual convictions are irrelevant. I think as members of society, though, the shared institutions we build should be around the values that we share.
Okay, so what if we found that the shared values of society were moving towards those of 1938 Germany, perhaps, where particular groups were seen as less human than other groups in society, and that was very much becoming the common view. Would that be acceptable because that's just what the shared values are?
No, I don't think it would be. I think it's unlikely to happen.
But it did happen.
It did happen there. I think it's unlikely to happen now. But it's not impossible. And I think as a foundation and a basis for social institutions, I would also want to be clear that the rule of law and democracy and human rights and all the things that have become quasi-constitutional for us in the last 60 years, and some of which have legal protection, would also form the basis
Okay, so
of social institutions.
are you not saying then that your humanist beliefs are the stopping point and that you are happy with shared values as long as they're compatible with your humanist beliefs?
Things like human rights and the rule of law and democracy and so on, as the basis or foundation of a society or of a civilization, of a liberal democracy, I don't think they're specifically humanist. I think they are themselves pragmatic political principles that are worked out between people of different convictions for their mutual
so let me try this on you then. I once heard you talk about the place of Christian beliefs in relation to shared values, and you used the word gloss, that they were simply a gloss. In other words, that I interpret that as that they're a sort of motivating additional extra which Christians sort of go to because they're part of their faith. Would you see your humanist beliefs as just a gloss on shared values, or would you see them as having a more fundamental role in those shared values?
No, I wouldn't see them as a gloss. They could be perceived as a gloss or a flavour, and so could Christian beliefs. But I think that I would see my beliefs as the origin of my values, actually, the motivation behind my values. And I would see for a Christian, I would see Christian beliefs as being the same thing, a motivation. For the outside observer, using shared values as a benchmark, of course, all our peculiar motivations look like a gloss or a flavour or a distinct mode. But I would accept that certain religious beliefs that religious believers hold are genuinely the motivators of their values, just as certain of my beliefs are for me too.
Okay, another thing that you're on record as saying is that you were offered atheist schools by the Secretary of State. He sort of challenged you to go and set up
that's right.
free school.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and you said that you weren't in that game. What you wanted was inclusive schools.
Yes.
And you're on record as having said this, is that actually that you don't need to have an atheist school because inclusive schools, or schools as they are now, as long as they had no collective worship, would be in all but name humanist. Now, what did you mean by that?
Well, not atheist schools, as you said earlier, but humanist schools, you mean. I think that, what I meant by that is that I think it's highly unlikely that a humanist would want, as I said earlier, as it were, sort of humanist instruction for their child. I think by and large, humanist parents are probably liberally inclined when it comes to educating their child. And so I think that an inclusive shared school, an inclusive common school, would actually correspond to most humanists' idea of ideal educational environment. So I think that a school which didn't discriminate in its admissions or its employment, held assemblies around shared values, themes and so on, and had an objective, fair and balanced curriculum for beliefs and values, I think would correspond to a humanist ideal school. It wouldn't be a humanist school in the way that a Christian school is Christian, but I think it would be the school a humanist would like to see.
So it wouldn't be a school based on humanist beliefs?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a very interesting sort of qualification.
Yeah.
Can you, I mean, because as a Christian, when I hear or read you say that common schools are all but humanist, all but name, it sounds as though you're saying actually they're based on our beliefs and therefore we don't need to have atheist schools because we've already got them.
Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't know. I accept the rebuke in
it's
in
not a
language.
rebuke.
No, it's justified. It's justified. I think that what I meant was that they would be the sort of school that a humanist would be wanting to send their child
Okay.
to. I also think, by the way, that people of other beliefs would be happy to send their children to that sort of school as well, as experience shows.
Yeah, I mean, I think I might challenge you see, because I think that I might then go on and say, actually, I understand that distinction that you've made, but actually, in reality, my view would be that what you're arguing for is schools based on humanist beliefs, because it's schools where the question of God is bracketed out of the school. Not, I agree, in the religious education, because I know that the BHA is a great supporter of religious education, but in the sense that conversation about God can't happen in any other context because it's deemed to be irrelevant. And that seems to me to be a humanist understanding of how knowledge and religious belief are related to each other.
Well, I think as a point about knowledge, obviously it's pertinent, of course that's true. I mean, it would, in such a school as we're envisaging, it would clearly not be a legitimate sort of argument to bring up in a lesson about the origins of the universe. Give me an example of what God being on the agenda outside of RE would be in a Christian school. I have something to respond to.
Well, if I go back to my questions about human flourishing, I think one's beliefs in God fundamentally shape your understanding of what it is to flourish as a human being. In fact, I think they're shaped by what as a Christian I would call your beliefs about eschatology, about what it means to be a fully human being made in the image of God. And one of those is a complete trust in the idea that the universe is created by God and for the purposes of God. Now that means that when you're in a science lesson, that belief is not irrelevant in the sense that it frames the whole reason why you teach the science.
Right, but is it material to the subject of a lesson?
No, I mean, in one sense, I quite accept that you can teach a science lesson, good science lesson, without any mention of God. And people who are Buddhists and Christians and humanists and all sorts of people can together learn science and they all understand what's going on. But the big difference is that as a Christian school, you'll care deeply that the setting of that science is in the context of the worship of God. Whereas in a humanist school, that would be completely irrelevant.
Yeah, it would be completely irrelevant. But
in a humanist school.
But I think no more irrelevant than it would be in a mixed school.
In a mixed school, I think we might want to actually say to children, people actually understand the nature and the significance of science in different ways.
You might want to say that, possibly.
Well, I think if you care about more than just... I see one of my examples I use is, do science teachers care about whether the products of their education end up working in the laboratory of a concentration camp or the laboratory of a hospital?
Right, depends on the science teacher probably, but
well, it does,
probably
but as a good teacher, I think they should care.
Yeah.
And I think a good science teacher should feel that their work has failed.
Well, I agree, to the extent that what you're saying is that a science teacher isn't just a teacher of science, I agree with you completely. I mean, the role of teacher and the profession of teacher and the way that a teacher should conduct themselves, whatever it happens to be that they're teaching. And of course, this is a even more interesting discussion for primary school teachers, who are teaching everything.
Who are doing it all.
I think is very important. And how we, conceive of the role of teacher is important, I agree, whatever they're teaching.
Yeah.
But I still hold that unless you are going to say that there is a particular Christian gloss to be put on the science lesson one way or another, then it would be just as irrelevant to omit God in a humanist school as it is in a shared school, and just as likely to happen and just as appropriate.
Yeah, I think the danger is that you end up with what I hear some business people saying, which is, what I do is just business. All this moral, ethical stuff, spiritual stuff,
of course,
is irrelevant.
Yes, I mean the separation of elements of human experience, one from the other, that curriculums often encourage, I think, is probably risky. But I think that's why it's important that certain themes, certain strands should run through the whole curriculum.
You can't answer questions of meaning and significance without dealing with religious and non-religious beliefs and their relationship to each other and to the curriculum area that you're looking at.
I think all subjects also carry their own debates about meaning and significance.
Yeah.
I mean, in history, what is the debates behind that, to do with period, to do with the flow of human events, to do with how we should conceive of societies in the past.
And these are difficult things to teach, and I think the danger is that schools opt for what is a relatively straightforward approach, which is to say we do the facts and we do the concepts of the discipline, but these bigger questions, we don't do that here. We leave that for somewhere else.
If that's true, then I think it's a shame.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure.
But you don't want to reinforce that by, from what I hear you saying, you wouldn't want to reinforce anything like that happening.
No.
No. Andrew, thank you very much.
Thank you.